And welcome, Hoosier fans, to another victorious episode of the Assembly Call, as today your Indiana Hoosiers grind out a 75-71 victory over the Minnesota Golden Gophers at the Barn in a game of a couple of undermanned teams missing really important players. The Hoosiers found a way to win in, I don't know if this win is more impressive than the Notre Dame game, considering the opponent, but in some ways it may be, because, this was the kind of game that I think Archie Miller envisions his team winning. And he mentioned during his pregame comments with Don Fisher that one of the challenges he's having with this team is teaching them how they are going to have to win games. This team in particular, with this particular combination of players, that it's not going to be with pretty offense. It's going to be with toughness and with grit and by grinding it out. And that is exactly what Indiana did today. A really impressive victory. The Hoosiers win 75-71, and we're excited to break it down for you on this episode of the Assembly Call. I'm your host, Jerod Morris. I'm here with Andy Bottoms and Ryan Phillips, and let's start tonight's show as we start every show, and that is with our Hoosier Proud banner moment. And when I first sat down here, I was going to give the banner moment to Justin Smith for the three-pointer that he made to put Indiana up one. It was 70-68 Minnesota. Justin Smith drains a three-pointer. It put Indiana up one. They would not trail again. And for a freshman to step up like he did, not just that shot, but the entire day, was absolutely huge. But upon reflection, I can't not give the banner moment to Robert Johnson. And it's not just for the totality of his play in the second half. I know he made some mistakes, but obviously on balance, his play was outstanding. But there was a sequence there late in the second half when it was kind of danger zone time, and someone had to step up and make plays to keep Indiana in it. And I'm talking about when it was 67-62. And it kind of looked like Minnesota had opened up a bit of a lead that they were going to start to push away. And Robert makes two straight and ones. He, on one of them, Al Durham played some really great defense. Robert grabbed a rebound, went coast to coast, scored, got fouled, made it. And that's been a challenge for him, to absorb contact and still get the ball up and score. And he did it. And then two possessions later, he got that steal on the inbounds, went coast to coast, scored again, and got fouled. And what I loved about that particular play was the aggressiveness, and the assertiveness. We have seen Robert really struggle in some of those moments, deciding what he's going to do. Is he going to shoot it? Is he going to pass it? And there was no hesitation. He got fouled and he scored. And that was just huge at the time. That made it 69-68. It pulled Indiana back to the point where then Justin Smith could take that three and it give Indiana the lead, as opposed to it maybe bring Indiana to within two. So, on a day when there were so many big plays made by Indiana down the stretch, it's hard to figure out which is the best one. But I've got to tip my cap to the senior Robert Johnson, who battled through some adversity today and some tough plays, and he made some boneheaded plays, but my goodness, was he big in the second half, scoring, rebounding, just doing the little things to help deliver this victory to Indiana. And what a big, big victory it was. And we obviously look forward to breaking down so many elements of it for you here on tonight's show. Our banner moment, as always, brought to you by our friends at Hoosier Proud, an Indiana-based t-shirt and apparel company that is by Hoosiers and for Hoosiers. And if you haven't checked out HoosierProud.com yet, or even if you have and you need reasons why you should either go for the first time or go again, let me give you a few. The first one is the most important. It's their designs. So we obviously have our Assembly Call t-shirts there. You can check those out. They now have officially licensed IU gear, which is new this year. So there's basketball-inspired shirts, there's football-themed shirts, there's soccer-themed shirts. Go check those out. And then, of course, they have the designs that they made a big splash with when they came out. Unique designs inspired by elements of the Hoosier State. All of those available at HoosierProud.com. And the second reason is the philanthropy. They support Indiana-based charities. So your purchases of t-shirts at Hoosier Proud will support charities that are based in the Hoosier State. And the third reason is Hoosier Proud is really generous to our audience. They give you 15% off when you go there, not just on the Assembly Call shirts, but on your entire order. So just go, pick out all the stuff you want, put it in your shopping cart, and when you go to check out, use the promo code ASSEMBLY, ASSEMBLY, and you will get 15% off your entire order. That is at HoosierProud.com. All right, it is time to move the ball, find the open man, and get some opening thoughts from the rest of our team. We start with Andy Bottoms and his Bottoms line, brought to us by iustore.shop.
Sorry, we were late getting on. The servers here at the Robert Johnson fan club were overloaded, so I had a hard time getting on. But luckily,
waiting all season to say that.
yeah, you do what you can. You gotta keep them in the holster. But I mean, honestly, the second half, 43 points for IU. All 43 came from Justin Smith, Robert Johnson, and Juwan Morgan. And I think you throw in Zach McRoberts, who ended the game with another McRoberts-esque 7 rebounds, 4 steals, 3 assists type game. But those guys were fantastic, and they're kind of part of a lineup I wanted to highlight. We haven't been doing as much of the lineup analysis. I've still been trying to do it even during the games, and this game proved to be interesting, particularly in the second half. So IU gets down 8 early in the second half within about 5 minutes, because the first 25 minutes of this were basically like Wisconsin, the jerseys had changed, but the game story was the same. IU's down 8 points at the 15:44 mark. They take out Devontae Green, they put in Al Durham, and IU proceeds to outscore Minnesota by 10 points during like 6 minutes and 22 seconds, where they didn't sub at all, where IU didn't sub at all. So they're plus 10. Everybody freaks out, including me, when Robert Johnson and Juwan Morgan go out during that little stretch. Minnesota builds back up a lead, and they're up by 5 with about 3 minutes left. That lineup gets back together again and closes out the game on an 11-2 run. So those guys, again, that's Durham, Johnson, McRoberts, Morgan, and Smith, a total of plus 19 in the second half when that group was on the court. Now, admittedly, the number of options were pretty limited based on, 1, the health of the roster, and 2, how some other guys were playing. But I tell you what, I mean, those were big stretches, and they were stretches in which the team really, kind of folded and packed it in against Wisconsin. It felt like, when the game took a really similar trajectory. And so a lot of credit to those guys for bouncing back and playing well. And obviously excited for Robert Johnson, but great game from Justin Smith. Cue the why hasn't Justin Smith been playing more crowd. I'm sure we'll get a lot of those questions, but
Ryan's rant is next.
Just I can't wait. I can't wait to see what it is. But no, just an amazing performance. I mean, I think this is the kind of thing that everybody hoped they'd see from this team as they went. And there's been some games where you don't know that guys learn something, and time will tell whether this is a turning point in this season or not. But I kind of talked about the radio show that is at some point one of these seniors going to say, hey, I'm not going out like this. And tonight felt like that for Robert Johnson, just with how aggressive he was. 28, 7 and 7, plus a couple steals is not too bad a night for him. So, congrats to Archie and the guys for getting this one done.
And now it's the Ryan Says I Told You So portion of the show, brought to us by thebiglead.com.
Yeah, look, after the Wisconsin game, I said, maybe it's time to give some of these young guys a chance to do something. And I think my point was not necessarily that they'll be better or that they will definitely rise above, but it's sort of what do you have to lose? Give these guys a shot. And today, Justin Smith got his shot and was fantastic. Now, that's not to say that Justin Smith is going to do this the rest of the season, but he provided energy. He provided scoring. He had 20 points, only 3 rebounds, 2 of them offensive that were big. He did turn the ball over twice. He had 4 fouls. I mean, there were parts of it that were imperfect, but the energy he brought, the aggressiveness he brought, it was different than what this team has had before. And it's, if he's just going to be sitting there, you might as well get him in. He's not redshirting. You might as well use him some. And they used him today. And of course, it was likely because of injuries that he got the start. But at the same time, the lift he provided with the team was enormous. And also now when the other guys like a Collin Hartman who's sitting on the bench is sitting there watching this, maybe he says, hey, maybe I need to step up my game a little bit and have a little more energy. And the other freshman might say, hey, maybe when I get my shot, I can prove myself too. It creates a competition among these guys, a friendly team-based competition of, hey, we can all do this clearly. I mean, Justin Smith is a talented kid, but that was effort that got him that today. It was very little just, oh, I'm more talented than the other guys on the floor. That was effort. It was smarts, and it was taking advantage of an opportunity that was handed to him. And I think the biggest play of the game was that 3-pointer he hit that was, that gave Indiana the lead late. It was an enormous play, and he had the guts to take that shot. And again, 7 of 10 from the field. He took advantage at the free throw line, 4 of 4, and 2 of 2 from 3-point range in 25 minutes. I mean, give the kid credit. He took advantage of an opportunity that was given to him, and give credit to the coaching staff for handing him that chance.
Absolutely. All right, you are listening to the Assembly Call IU postgame show. I'm Jerod Morris here with Ryan Phillips and Andy Bottoms, and we are breaking down Indiana's 75-71 victory over Minnesota. And, when you just kind of take a step back, look, the loss to Wisconsin was obviously very disappointing because it felt like that was a winnable game. But Indiana's able to salvage these first 2 games in Big Ten play. And now the Hoosiers sit at 2-2. And look, I hesitate to call this any kind of turning point or start to think that, hey, this team is really going to turn the corner now, because I think we've seen, this group of players enough to know that a lot of times, as soon as something good happens, something bad is around the corner, and vice versa. As down as we felt about Wisconsin, look how the guys came out and responded today. Look how they played. And even more impressive, I think, that they were able to do this without Collin Hartman out there. Obviously you missed Deron Davis a lot, but Collin Hartman has been kind of an emotional leader, and what he did against Wisconsin, had one of his best games. I really got worried that with him not playing, we'd miss his leadership. But, Robert Johnson stepped up and Juwan Morgan stepped up, and those guys really led the way. And so, I want to take a few minutes here and just recognize Juwan Morgan as well, because, Robert Johnson obviously led the team in scoring, made the free throws late, and Justin Smith, really emerged with by far his best game. But Juwan finishes with 20 points. He has 12 boards, 5 offensive rebounds, 4 blocked shots. And, what I loved about him was that the keys that Archie Miller was really looking forward to or looking at coming into this game, number 1 was transition defense, not letting Minnesota get out and get on the run. And they did in the first half, but Indiana did a much better job in the second half of limiting those opportunities, in part because they limited turnovers. And I thought Juwan Morgan had a lot to do with that. He really ran the floor well. He had a couple of blocks in transition, but also on the glass. He was so tough with some of the rebounds that he got, both on the defensive end and the rebounding end. And this Minnesota team, which is a really good rebounding team. Now, granted, they're without Lynch and they're without Coffey, and so they're not as good of a rebounding team. But Indiana rebounds 78% of Minnesota's misses. The Hoosiers grab. What'd you say?
I said they crushed them on the
They
ground.
crushed them. Indiana had 17 offensive rebounds. Minnesota only gets 8. And obviously McRoberts had a lot to do with that. But I thought Juwan Morgan set the tone early and was just a monster on the glass. And I thought some of the offense that he brought early was really big for Indiana, for a team, that's on the road, that's looking to get footing, looking to build confidence. So Juwan Morgan, another just outstanding performance from him in look, you don't want to say that you can take it for granted, but you can start to count on it now. And I thought this was a big spot against a guy in Jordan Murphy, who's a terrific player. And once again, just like he did against Bonzie Colson, Juwan Morgan outplayed him and his team won. Andy, your thoughts on Juwan?
Yeah, I mean, he each of those guys, particularly Robert and Juwan, were guys that when IU really needed a bucket. I know you mentioned that stretch with Robert in the second half. I thought there were times, multiple times during the game, Juwan hit some big 3-pointers. Just when they needed somebody to come up with a play, he was always there. Made that hustle play that made everybody, his heart jump up in their throat when he comes down on. I think Johnson broke his fall enough that he didn't get hurt on that play, but really just played hard. And there were times that those guys, I mean, they each played 38 minutes, so it's obvious. I mean, those guys just played themselves to the point of exhaustion, and you could just tell at times they were just kind of gutting it out, trying to pull themselves through it. But yeah, I mean, they really did a good job of attacking the basket, particularly with Lynch not in there. He's, one of the better shot blockers in the country. Also apparently, allegedly a deplorable human being. So they took advantage of him not being in there and really were, didn't settle into. They ended up taking 19 threes for the game, and actually shot a pretty good clip from there, but had 51 2-point attempts. And so that's, we've seen IU get easily taken out of, you see the plan initially and they get taken out of what they want to do. I thought they really were successful in large part because they stuck with the plan that they had, and the movement off the ball, particularly with Robert Johnson, but also with Juwan Morgan, just to kind of get himself open in the post. I thought that was it seemed like the best that has been the entire season. So yeah, definitely credit to those guys.
I got to jump in. I got to credit the coaching staff for getting these guys together and having them stick to what was working. And at times, and Dan Dockich pointed this out, and I'll give the man credit. He was right.
Big fan of the show.
He's a huge fan of this show.
And my wife, apparently. I'll
give Dan, I don't know what that reference is, but I'm not going to touch it with a 10-foot pole. No, he pointed out that at one point Archie Miller mid segment switched plays to sort of a flex offense, which is a lot like what Wisconsin runs, and he drew a foul by getting a play going to the basket. And I felt like this was Archie's best coaching job so far. I think that he really was, on top of things and making adjustments. I know that one lineup that we're all going to talk about where you took Juwan Morgan and Robert Johnson out of the game that Andy mentioned was awful. But I don't think he had the options available to really fix that. I think that he had to kind of roll with that lineup for a few minutes.
Well, the timing was bad. I mean, you wasted 3 offensive possessions in a tight game.
Right.
It's a quibble, but you probably could have avoided that somehow.
Well, the problem was he was trying to get them rest because they played so much. He was trying to get them rest before the under 8 timeout.
But maybe stagger it, I guess.
The problem was that it lasted. There was a long gap there until that timeout came, and it really wound up hurting Indiana. But those two guys played 37 minutes. That was really their only extended break. And so I think that was what he was trying to do. And then you could see his assistant coach was like, Archie, get him back in the game. Get him back in the game. You could see it. It was on TV. You could see it. But I think that again, you didn't have a Collin Hartman out there. You didn't have a Deron Davis, guys you could maybe go to in those situations to calm things down. So it was really just he was a victim of circumstance there. Other than that quibble, which I think is a worthwhile quibble that we can talk about. I thought this was his best coach game. I thought he did a fantastic job with the rotations. I thought the team did a fantastic job responding to him and just sticking with the stuff that they were running. And then also, doing things like showing the toughness of finishing at the rim, showing the toughness of out rebounding a good rebounding team, out hustling Minnesota in many segments, and also not wilting when Nate Mason got his groove going. I mean, Nate Mason tried to take that game over, and I thought he was going to. I thought that I like, as again our friend Dan Dockich said, I think that when that was happening, I was thinking, oh man, Nate Mason, if he gets hot, this game's over. He got hot, and Indiana answered him, and I thought that was great. So there were a couple segments there of the game where they could have disappeared. They could have gone away. The barn is a tough place to play, and they were able to finish it out. So I think the team grew up a lot today and matured. Now, let's see if they can sustain it or if we see another step back.
I know, and that's again, we're going to be hesitant to make any broad proclamations that the team's ready to do this game in, game out. But that's why this win did feel just a little bit different, especially considering what Archie said before the game about the team needing to learn how they are going to win. Like, this seemed like the kind of win that is in Archie's image, that the kind of win that he wants his team to be able to get. And obviously shooting well helped. I mean, Indiana shot 43% from 3-point range, so we can't underestimate how important that was. But this was a toughness game. This was a gritty game. This is a game Indiana won because there were possessions when Juwan Morgan just wanted an offensive rebound more, and because Robert Johnson just wasn't going to be denied getting a bucket, and because a freshman stepped up on the road and made some big plays. And that's the kind of toughness physically and mentally that we've been wanting to see. Now, of course, we want to see it on a consistent basis, but you got to do it once, and to do it on the road, I think, is even more impressive and really confidence building for this team that needed a confidence builder on the road. So that's huge. All right, coming up on the assembly call, I will point out tonight's meaningful moment you might have missed. We will go inside the numbers and continue breaking down Indiana's 75-71 victory over Minnesota. That is next here on the assembly call. Stick with us. You are listening to the Assembly Call IU postgame show. I'm Jerod Morris here with Ryan Phillips and Andy Bottoms, and we are breaking down Indiana's thrilling 4-point victory over Minnesota today in Minneapolis. And it is time for tonight's meaningful moment that you might have missed. And Andy, you mentioned some really important stretches earlier when you were talking, and I'm glad you highlighted those. And one of them is the one for me, outside of that big stretch by Robert Johnson where he scored 6 straight points. I thought that Minnesota made a run where it was 40-38, if you remember, and Juwan Morgan makes that incredible post move to get a wide open bunny and missed it. And Minnesota scored 6 straight points, and it's 46-38, and it kind of feels like a little bit of a danger zone. And they eventually get it to a 48-40 victory, and it felt like things were teetering a little bit. And it's 48-40. Robert Johnson misses a layup. Juwan Morgan battles for a rebound, as he did all game, and he scored. It was a huge play to just kind of settle things down. The next time down, Robert Johnson goes inside to Juwan. He gets bumped, stays on balance, scores on a little jump hook. Now it's 48-44. And I thought that little 4-0 run led by JaJuan really kind of settled the team down a little bit. And it ignited what ended up being an 8-2 run that was ignited by that offense by Juwan Morgan. And then it was punctuated when Zach McRoberts got that steal and got it out ahead to Justin Smith. That made it 50-48. So again, when things were teetering today, it was the veterans who stepped up. Robert Johnson did it late. Juwan Morgan did it during that one stretch. And even if you go back to the first half, we know how poorly Indiana played at the very end of the first half when Minnesota went on that 8-0 run. But because of the lead that Indiana had built, they still went into halftime ahead. And it was 24-23. Zach McRoberts forces a bad shot on Isaiah Washington at the end of the shot clock, which he did 2 or 3 times today. Josh Newkirk pushed it out, found Robert Johnson, who knocked down a 3. That made it 27-23. That ignited an 8-0 run. So just as Juwan did in the second half, Robert did it in the first half. That ended up putting Indiana up 32-23 so that they could absorb that bad stretch at the end of the first half. But, I thought that those Indiana's ability to have a little spurtability tonight, to go on that 8-0 run, to go on the 8-2 run, and especially in the second half, to do it when it seemed like Minnesota was ready to take control of the game for good, I thought was huge. And again, a sign of the kind of maturity and mental toughness that we haven't always seen from this group. And it was so great to see in a tough road environment tonight. Andy, any other stretches for you that jump out?
No, I was actually thinking of the one that you talked about with where they kind of went on that run. And it was in the second half where McRoberts had, I think 2 out of 3 possessions. I think he had a steal or forced a turnover somewhere along the way. And that was at a time when, IU had, I stopped looking after a little while, but I mean, they had scored, I think 13 points on their first 7 possessions, scored on 6 of those 7 trips. I think they even scored on, the next 1 or 2 after that. And that was really what allowed them to build up that, that 8-point advantage. But as you said, during that stretch, McRoberts, I think he had 2 of his steals in about 3 possessions there where, that led to baskets for IU, and he assisted on another play in there. I thought he was really big in that stretch. I mean, it's, while certainly Johnson, Morgan, and Justin Smith will get the headlines, I thought the other guy who really played well and came up with some really key plays, the offensive rebound by McRoberts at the end. And I think Jeremy Price pointed out that Justin Smith kind of coming through and tapping it off the board, cleared some space for him. But I thought a lot of those kinds of little plays, the McRoberts type plays that are, often the meaningful thing that you might have missed where it might not show up in terms of points. And for a guy that didn't score, obviously it didn't tonight, but I thought he made a lot of little plays in key moments that really stabilized them. And I think he played 32 minutes or something.
30, I think.
Something similar to that. So he was, I thought he was really good in some key spots. So that stretch you mentioned initially in the second half was a big one for me.
Yeah, and look, that was missing against Wisconsin. Zach McRoberts wasn't really doing Zach McRoberts things. Whether it was just because he was struggling in his first start or Minnesota was kind of keying on him, but today he was able to get those things done. And man, you see how important they are. I mean, they don't always show up on the stat sheet, but they absolutely just jump off the screen when you're watching the team play. Ryan, you've got your meaningful moment.
Yeah, it was the moment that in Archie Miller's brain where he decided to insert Justin Smith into the starting lineup. I think that, look, I know that he was dealing with some injured guys today and making the choice instead of going with, letting McRoberts sort of slide down into more of a wing, forward position or putting in Freddie McSwain or leaving, Al Durham in there or something and going with a 4-guard lineup. He went with Justin Smith, a versatile guy who can do a lot of things for you, can go get a rebound, can play defense, has some length. Look, at times Justin looked like a freshman. There was a drive in there that he went to the hoop and got it blocked and just disjointed and off late in a key situation. I love the confidence, but at the same time, come on. It settled down a little, huh? And then defensively, a few times he didn't move his feet and tried to body guys and got calls for fouls or just let guys go right by him. I mean, those things are going to happen. He's a freshman, but at the same time, the level of aggressiveness he showed, I mean, it felt like he was ready for this game. He was ready for this moment to step up. And I thought that was huge. And just the guts for Archie to go with a guy who hadn't started. you know, and to lean on him so heavily today was pretty gutsy. And I thought that was a game changer.
Well, and I want to address something because I got a lot of tweets, in my feed, people saying like, see, told you Justin Smith should have been playing a lot more. And why hasn't he been playing? And what's Archie been doing? And look, this was a great game by Justin Smith, but just because he played really, really well today doesn't necessarily mean that he should have been getting big minutes before. And the reason I say that is because there were reasons why he wasn't playing before. Yes. He was struggling to absorb contact and score down low. He was not making outside shots. He was not always bringing, I think, consistent effort and focus on the defensive end. That was different today. So this was a different guy, and maybe it had been a different guy in practice, and that's what gave Archie the confidence. So, look, we don't know. I mean, if Justin Smith had been playing like this every day in practice, then obviously he deserved to play more, but we hadn't seen it in the games. And so I just think it's unfair to look in hindsight and say because he played well today, the coaches have erred in not giving him the opportunity yet. It may just be a case of a guy seizing an opportunity when he got it and doing some of the things that he hadn't been doing well, finally doing them well. So kudos to Justin Smith, but it doesn't necessarily mean that the coaching staff has been making a mistake all along.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point. And also, I mean, as I said, and that's kind of what I meant when I said he was ready for this. He stepped on the court and looked like a guy who was ready to have a breakout game. There was just his body language, everything. And maybe it was something different about coming out first, as a starter, getting his name announced, all that stuff. And that just kind of locked him in as opposed to sort of running in off the bench. And those moments affect guys different ways. And I know it seems like a trivial thing, but maybe it was just sort of like, hey, you know what? I can do this. I can hang here. I wouldn't be starting if I couldn't. And maybe that gave him the confidence to move forward. And again, that was kind of my point with play some of the younger guys, give them an opportunity. Maybe they're timid because they don't think they belong yet. And you give them a chance to belong. I'm not saying you start all the freshmen. I'm just saying give them playing time. But maybe you give them a chance to belong and you get an extra something out of it. I guarantee you Justin Smith is going to be on fire in practice this week because he knows he can hang with those other guys now. I mean, he clearly did. And so I think that it's, again, and Archie knows this. It's not like I was telling him anything he didn't know. It's just that, now you see.
I don't think you were telling him specifically anything. I mean,
well, no, he watches.
I like how Ryan always acknowledges that the coaches weren't watching the show and listening for tips, as if that needs to be clarified.
90% of the people in the Indiana fan base think they know more than the coaches. So at least give me credit for that. Right. But no, I think that it's, just you wanted to see it happen. And I think that's why a lot of people were repeating it. Just like, hey, you know what? We've heard a lot about these guys. Give them a chance to do something. You've seen Al Durham play a lot this year. And he's sort of hit a freshman wall and hasn't been playing great, but at least he's giving you something defensively. It's nice to see somebody else step up into that position and play well.
Andy, you have a point here?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that they talked about with Justin Smith was that I think he and Al were guys that Archie talked about really coming back re-energized after giving him a few days off around the holidays. He came back in that Youngstown State game, got to play 11 minutes, scored 8 points. He had scored 6 points in the 7 games prior to that, and he'd made 1 field goal in the prior 7 games. So we can certainly argue that they wouldn't get a lot of minutes, but he wasn't doing a whole lot when he was out there either. So, you can argue he did a lot because he finally got some rope and some playing time, or you can argue the other way as he wasn't getting the rope and the playing time because he wasn't playing well. And I think some of the defensive things that Ryan mentioned were part of the issue that we saw. There was no in between for him tonight defensively. I thought there were possessions that he played really well, particularly against Jordan Murphy. And then there were others where he really struggled. So yeah, I don't necessarily view it as that, but I do think it's, 2 of the 3 games since, Archie's talked about him being re-energized and maybe being able to get past that wall. He's played well. So I think that's a positive sign. And, I certainly he's going to get the chance with Davis out to earn more of those minutes. And so, those who were, sitting on that hot take can shove it in everybody's face again a little bit more if he continues.
I would never do such a thing.
And if he continues to play, I said those, I didn't single out you specifically. But nobody's going to be mad if he doesn't, if he continues to play well. It's not like, I wish he wouldn't play well. So, it could prove the point. It's a win-win. Ryan gets to gloat and IU's going to play better if he does well. So I see no downside here to him continuing to play well.
Gloaty Ryan is the best Ryan. Absolutely.
This show
is only Ryan. I'm not really sure.
This show is just a lot more fun when Indiana wins. You know, it really is. It really is. All right, you're listening to the Assembly Call IU postgame show. I'm Jerod Morris here with Andy Bottoms and Ryan Phillips breaking down Indiana's entertaining and much needed 75-71 victory over Minnesota. Guys, let's go inside the numbers. We mentioned the rebounding numbers. You know, to me, that is huge. The fact that Indiana, which was so poor rebounding at Wisconsin, one of the main reasons they lost. Archie Miller called them soft on the glass in his post-game press conference. And today, against a really good, rebounding Minnesota team in their building, albeit without two, really good players, Indiana dominates on the glass. So that was obviously huge. And look, we can't not acknowledge the importance of the three-point shooting. Minnesota knocked down 9 threes. I believe they had 8 in the first half. So they only got 1 3-pointer in the second half, one or maybe 2 at max. So I thought Indiana's three-point defense was better. I mean, just, not allowing Minnesota to get as many good looks, because they did get some good looks in the first half. And then Indiana able to knock down 8 for 19. And what's really big on that is the balance of the three-point shooting. Because against Wisconsin, it was only Collin Hartman. And a lot of times when Indiana has shot well from three-point range, it's been one guy doing all the work. But Robert knocked down 3 of them. Juwan Morgan knocked down 3 of them. Justin Smith hit 2 of them. So to have 3 guys get going and make multiple three-pointers, I thought was really big. And then, the other thing, too, is I think for just looking at it from a free throw perspective, a lot of times you go in to a place like the Barn, and you're playing a little bit undermanned, you don't necessarily expect to be able to battle them to essentially a draw from the free throw line. But Indiana, 11 for 15, Minnesota, 12 for 16. So they have, a 1-point advantage there. But I think the fact that Indiana was able to battle them to a draw was big when it came to winning this game. Andy, what did you have in terms of numbers that jumped out?
Yeah, I thought the free throw shooting was interesting, or the free throws were interesting, because that was really, if you looked at the rebounds was a big thing we talked about with Wisconsin, or with Minnesota. But they had come in, I think they still are. I think it's already updated after the game. They're still 10th or 9th in opponent free throw rate. And they're in the top 60 offensively. So to pretty much play them to a draw in that aspect of the game, I think was certainly important. The turnover numbers weren't particularly high, 13 for IU, 14 for Minnesota, and those only led to 12 Minnesota points as 13 IU turnovers. So that really wasn't a turning point in the game. Neither team got much off the bench. But the 2-point defense continued to be pretty good. IU didn't shoot well from 2-point range by any means.
Oh my, we missed some easy looks.
Yeah, there was a lot of. I mean, that's how you get 51 2-point attempts in the game, and end up. You got to remember, at the Barn, one hoop is shorter than the other. So I mean, the guys are just off. It's just a tough day. Yeah. The other number I will point out, and this is off of the site I'm using, doesn't have the plus minus on here yet, so we can again throw whatever you want at it for for a single game. But one guy who we didn't talk about a whole lot, we talked about the kind of the 4 guys who played really well, was Al Durham, who was plus 24, if the numbers that I have are correct when I charted the lineups myself. So that's kind of oddly stands out for a guy who scored no points and grabbed 2 rebounds and 2 assists. So I don't really know if that means anything whatsoever, but he was by far the best on the team.
Well, I tell you what it means. It means that he wasn't Josh Newkirk or Devontae Green, who took Devontae Green played well in the first half, but also finished. He finished 1 for 6. Josh Newkirk just didn't show up tonight, and we know that there's games when Josh Newkirk just doesn't show up. And I feel like hopefully as Archie gets to know that better, he'll recognize it. And like a night like tonight, he should have only gotten 5 minutes because he wasn't ready to play. And when he came in the second half, he really hurt the team. And so Al Durham played by default, and to a certain extent rode the other guy's coattails to that plus minus. But at least in Al's defense, he played tough. Like Al, there were a couple possessions that Indiana was really struggling, and Al found a way to get to the free throw line or get fouled and at least get something out of it. And so, he at least didn't take stuff off the table. And, for a freshman playing in a tough road environment, sometimes that's all you can ask for. And so he provided that tonight.
Well, and he kept his poise at the end of the game when, Nate Mason was all over him in the last minute trying to steal the ball, apparently knowing that he wouldn't get called for a foul. And so, I thought he really played with a lot of poise. He was the one who ended up drawing that foul, I believe, in the stretch that we talked about earlier, where, Archie kind of changed the set in the middle and it allowed, IU to get fouled, but most importantly, to stop the clock so Juwan and Robert could come back in.
The black hole in the middle of the second half.
Yes, exactly. So there was that. But no, I mean, I think IU got 11 more shots than Minnesota from the floor, which, the rebounding numbers speak to that. But, they just did the little things like that they're going to need to, they're undermanned not playing well, but they got a lot of the hustle plays and then assists. That's been, if you look at these last few games, those have been really up and down. Was incredibly poor against Wisconsin. 16 assists on 28 made field goals today. A rate that was a lot better than what we saw in the game earlier in the week.
Up in, Ryan.
Oh, sorry. I didn't hear you say that. Yeah. Look, here's my thing. Indiana, 42.1% from three. We've been saying they need to hit some shots. 8 of 19 from three today. That's not fantastic. That's not phenomenal. That's not out of the way, but that's sustainable. I mean, it's 42% is fine. If you hit 42% of your shots, even stretch that down between 35 and 42%.
Yeah, I was going to say that would be like first in the country.
No, but I'm saying in an individual, in an individual game, I'm just saying you hit.
I mean, it is kind of what we're used to. We're having to adjust to this new reality. So
that's fair enough. No, 8 of 19. You just hitting 8 threes and taking less than 25. We'll say in that range. Anywhere in there, you hit some outside shots, it spreads the floor and makes guys have to. That's why Indiana had such an easier time going to the hoop, because they were actually making some shots and guys were shooting with confidence. Robert Johnson is still fading back on his threes and it's driving me nuts, but at the same time, he was stepping into them confidently a little more today. So yeah, I thought that was huge for Indiana to actually knock down some shots. The fact that they hit 42% from three and only 40% from the field is surprising, because this team's 2-point percentage isn't that bad, but it looked like you're right. I mean, you guys have been right. They did miss a lot of easy, buckets on the inside. They could have made this an even bigger win for them. So look, I'm satisfied with hitting a few threes, stretching it out, getting threes from 3 different players, because it seems like lately we've been getting them from maybe 1 or 2 a game. Well, at least another guy got in there and made some, and Juwan Morgan was also shooting confidently, which is positive.
Yes, and hold that thought. We're going to talk about that a little bit more. Coming up on the Assembly Call, we continue our breakdown of Indiana's 75-71 victory over Minnesota. That is next here on the Assembly Call. Stick with us. You are listening to the Assembly Call IU postgame show. Catch us live immediately following every IU basketball game and every Thursday night on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/assemblycall. And you can also always view our live broadcasts right on our homepage at assemblycall.com. I am Jerod Morris here with Andy Bottoms and Ryan Phillips, and we are breaking down Indiana's first true road victory of the season, a 75-71 triumph over Minnesota. And Ryan, you mentioned at the end of the last segment, Juwan Morgan shooting confidently. And man, I don't want to breeze by that, because he did a lot of his work from 3-point range in the first half. But I thought that was a really big kind of storyline, and we'll have to see if it continues. But, if you remember, going all the way back to Hoosier Hysteria, there was an interview with Juwan where he, talked about how his big focus this year was, to prove he can shoot and to shoot with confidence. And we saw him, in the exhibition games, in the first few games, really looking for his 3-point shot. And we all felt kind of to the detriment of the rest of his game. And he wasn't shooting them well, and his percentage on the season is terrible. And the season really turned around for him when he ditched the 3-point shooting and just said, you know what? I'm a really good post player. I'm a really good rebounder. I'm going to go inside, do the dirty work, make the dog plays like he and Deron Davis talk about. And that really turned things around. And he's become a consistent contributor, a nightly double-double threat. Well, now if he can add the 3-point shot back to that, and, look, he was 3 for 4 tonight, and more than the makes, he shot confidently. And we've seen him, not looking so confident, almost like he was trying to will himself to believe he could make that shot. He just stepped up and stroked him to the point where, that 3-pointer that he took in the second half early in the shot clock, maybe not a great shot, but I didn't really have a problem with it because he shot it confidently. He had made some. So if he can do that, add that to his game, and teams have to respect that, now Indiana's best player becomes even better. And I kind of have this feeling like for Indiana to win games this year, he's going to have to be the best player on the floor. And while Robert Johnson, scored the most points and had the big moments late, I think Juwan Morgan was the best player on the floor tonight, and Indiana followed him, and that's why they won the game. And so if he can add that 3-point shooting to it, it's going to make him even more dangerous. We'll have to see if it continues, but I'm hoping that just the confidence that it looked like he shot with is something that can sustain, and he'll start to be able to make, like you said, if he can make 34-35% of his threes, that's a credible threat back there. Your thoughts on Juwan shooting, Ryan? Or Andy?
Yeah, sorry, I'm muting myself.
I just hesitated like Robert Johnson after a shot fake into the lane. Should have shot it, and I just dumped off a little pass that got stolen. I apologize, guys.
Yeah, sorry, I'm handling NFL work and all that stuff at the same time as this. Yeah,
I mean, it was Andy Reid in a playoff game. You probably could have written it, but as an Eagles fan, you probably could have written anything about this prior to the game happening.
You're right, and maybe I had a little more faith in him than I should have. Anyway, the thing about Juwan is, and look, there is a degree to this, and it seems so like nebulous and weird to say, but there is something about shooting confidently. I mean, there is form and all of that stuff, but there is a confidence factor. If you're shooting it and you think there's a chance it'll go in, or you think it will go in, you're going to shoot it better, and you're going to shoot it more often, and you're also likely going to maintain your form better. And with Juwan, I think that it was the best one for him was when he got an offensive rebound, backed out, stood there, and fired a three. And it was just perfect form, perfect everything. And he nailed it. And he knew he was going to nail it too. I mean, he shot it and he knew it was going in. You could just tell from his follow through and everything. So I think that with him, it's just, you see a couple go through and you get excited and you get more focused on it and you're not hesitant. And that's why I think that there's this problem with this team right now is a lot of guys are shooting it with absolutely no confidence. And to see a couple guys start to be like, you know what, this shot's going to go in and shoot them, with that confidence is a real positive.
Go ahead, Andy.
I thought Justin Smith was that way. I mean, that one he took late in the game.
Yep. He knew that was going in.
Very confidently, and he had hit one in the Youngstown State game as well, I think. So,
and he hit one in the first half. I mean, he scored those 5 quick points earlier that I think gave him a lot of confidence.
Yeah, that was huge for him to score those points. So, yeah, I mean, he stepped into that one, really confidently, and that was something we hadn't seen a ton of, even from him to that point. So, I thought that was a positive. One guy that we didn't talk about, who I thought gave him some good minutes, but also some kind of head scratching minutes, was Freddie McSwain in the first half. He was, the eight rebounds. I think he had all of them in the first half and scored a couple baskets, made some plays on the move, and even hit a face-up jump shot, which emboldened him to take a second face-up jump shot, which did not go well. I don't know if you can have a heat check from on like a 15-foot jumper, but that's the way I categorized it in the game.
Freddie, never shoot.
So, okay, I'm glad you brought up Freddie, because that's where I wanted to go next, because I agree with you. I thought he provided some really important minutes in the first half, got some offensive rebounds, helped Indiana establish kind of that, that they were going to take control on the glass early. And, had that jump shot, made a bucket down low. I'll tell you where everything turned for him. If you recall, and this was still in the first half, he went up for that dunk and he missed the dunk. And it's almost like he got, frustrated. And I don't know if he was a little bit tired at that point because he'd been playing a little bit, but he missed that dunk on the next possession. And he kind of didn't hustle back on the next possession down. He missed a bunny and he was really lackadaisical getting back. And his man is just standing over in the corner for a three-pointer, and he doesn't notice it until the man's already got the ball. And so he kind of does some fake hustle to get out to the guy. And you saw Archie Miller react to it before the guy even shot the ball. Archie kind of did that thing that coaches do where they kind of like turn around and kind of like fake throw their jacket, And like you could just tell he was ticked. And Freddie got taken out right after that. And I think, for a guy like Freddie McSwain, he can't have those kind of mental lapses because, we've all recognized, and we recognized this at a point last year, he can come in and really provide good minutes when he's hustling and doing his things, doing Freddie McSwain things. But when he gets out of that and gets a little flustered or makes a play and loses his focus, now those things go away because his defense isn't very good. He's not getting the rebounds. And so I thought it kind of really turned for him. And I'm not sure he had another rebound after that. I mean, I'd have to go check, but I think his production basically ended after that. And I don't know how excited Archie was to play him after seeing that play.
For a guy whose entire game is built on hustle, you can't display fake hustle. I mean, you just can't. Like, his whole thing is that he out hustles guys and plays hard, and you just can't throw in fake hustle if you're gonna be that guy.
Yeah, he only played about 3 minutes in the second half. I think maybe a little bit more than that, but I mean, I thought he did some good things, and certainly without Deron Davis for some period of time, maybe the rest of the season, depending upon what reports are out there and who said what. I mean, he's gonna have to play more, but I think it's him trying to stay within himself while he's on the court, because he was really effective early on in what he did. And Who knows how long Hartman might be out. But I thought it kind of actually gives way to another thing we had talked about with not playing guys with 2 fouls. There was a stretch in the first half when he really couldn't take Freddie out. This was again, kind of you could call it a great coaching move. You could call it a great coaching move that was made out of necessity, but Juwan really needed a rest, and Smith had already been out with 2 fouls, which is why Freddie was playing so much anyway. And so, came in, Justin made a play or 2 in there, gave Juwan some rest, got back out and didn't get another foul. So I think that was an interesting one. But I mean, had McSwain not played as well as he did when he first went in, I'm not really sure what other direction Archie would have been able to turn, quite honestly. But I thought good minutes from him and just another adjustment, again, maybe out of necessity by Archie that we saw that was a big one today.
Yep. All right. You're listening to the Assembly Call IU postgame show. I'm Jerod Morris here with Andy Bottoms and Ryan Phillips, breaking down Indiana's 75-71 victory over Minnesota. So let me ask you guys this, kind of big picture. We've seen at times, a guy gets injured, other guys kind of rally around, and you can do that for 40 minutes. And we saw, great effort from a team that has been inconsistent when it comes to effort. So, what elements of this game today are you willing to kind of believe in moving forward? Because now Indiana plays Penn State and Northwestern as they head home. Andy, is there anything from this game that you're going to take and kind of be confident in and start to count on? Or is this something where we still, you got to keep this team at arm's length a little bit, given their history, and just see if they can stack another game, with focus and effort and energy on top of this one, and see how many they can stack in a row before you really start to buy in and say any kind of corner is turned?
Yeah, I mean, I think if we've learned anything from watching this team, it's that you probably can't get too high and maybe you can't get too low. So I think there are definitely positive things. I'm certainly hopeful that Justin Smith can continue, what he showed. And I think IU can play. They've played well in stretches without Jerod Davis, because they've almost had to, again, by necessity with his foul trouble and just the playing time that he's seen. So I think playing without him is a situation they've, for better or worse, gotten accustomed to over the course of the season. I think the Hartman one is a little bit bigger. And it seemed like, at least if he warmed up today, maybe there's a good chance that he comes, back when they play Penn State. But, I think the off-ball movement, again, to go back to that, I thought was really good. I think that's something that for a team that struggles to really create one-on-one shot opportunities, they're going to have to continue that. And it was so striking. It was so much strikingly better than it had been during the season that you hope that, those are some lessons that they can take away. But yeah, I think like most fans, I'm probably in the keep them at arm's length camp.
Yeah. All right. Coming up in our final segment of this edition of the Assembly Call, we hand out our game balls. We look ahead to Indiana's next opponent, and we deliver our final thoughts on Indiana's 75-71 victory in last call. That is next here on the Assembly Call. Stick with us. You are listening to the Assembly Call IU postgame show. I'm Jerod Morris here with Andy Bottoms and Ryan Phillips, wrapping up our breakdown of Indiana's 75-71 win over Minnesota. And gentlemen, it is time to hand out our game balls. And Ryan, I know that you only have a few minutes left to be with us, but let's hand out our game balls. You can go first and give us your last call if you want to as well.
Yeah, Justin Smith, 20 points, 3 rebounds, 2 turnovers. 7 of 10, 4-4 from the field, 4-4 from the free throw line, 2 of 2 from 3-point range in 26 minutes. The freshman getting a start here is clearly my game ball. I thought that he provided an energy and a boost, a little more athleticism too, to a team that really desperately needed it at this point of the season. Just a really encouraging start for him, and I really loved what he provided up and down the floor today. And look, even defensively, he made some mistakes, but his energy and effort was there, and he was locked in. So I got to give it to him. I think that was the big change for this team from Wisconsin, was seeing him play a lot. I know Robert Johnson career high, and I'm sure you guys will get him and Juwan Morgan both in here. I have a feeling, that those will be the other guys. I don't know who's taking who, but I think Andy's gonna be very mad at you if you take Robert Johnson. I thought that was the big change for Indiana today, was getting Justin Smith on the floor and letting him kind of do his thing and settle in there. And I hope we see more of it, because we all know how high we all were on him as a recruit and how much we really liked him last year coming in, when we were scouting him before he hit campus. And I think that was a big bonus to Indiana. Now you've got another guy who can clearly do some things at play at this level. And that's really my final thought. Was I thought that it was a big win for Indiana on the road. Again, to clarify for people, I got to run because of football playoffs. But I I think that it was a huge road win for Indiana. They showed a lot of maturity. When things started to go bad in the second half, they could have wilted, and they did not. They stood up to it. And I tweeted out, they were down about 4 with a few minutes left, and you looked at how they were attacking offensively with their best players on the floor. And I said, if Indiana gets stops, they're going to win this game. The thing is, they got to get stops, and they weren't getting stops for much of the second half. They all of a sudden just bowed their back and got some stops, and they were able to win the game, and they made free throws late to seal it. Again, showing some maturity and showing some confidence. And I thought that was the key to the key to everything, was just a team that refused to lose the game. They really did. And that was impressive. So hopefully, again, I'm keeping him at arm's length as well, but hopefully this is something that can be sustainable.
Very nice. Thank you very much, Ryan. Andy.
Thanks, everybody.
Your game ball. I feel like this should be an obvious choice, but
yeah, I would say so. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely, for me, it was Robert Johnson. We talked about on Assembly Call Radio this week about the whole notion of, kind of playing hard versus playing well. And he was the guy that I singled out as, I think he's playing really hard. He's just not playing all that well. And I thought there was still some of those moments tonight when, he ended up with 3 turnovers, which was the most of anybody on the team.
That feels low. I mean,
it did.
Like he could have had a lot more than that.
Yeah, that's what I was just going to say. It felt like more, quite honestly, when I looked. But he's now got 12 assists over his last 2 games. He grabbed 7 rebounds, made the big free throws, and scored a career high in 28 points. And as you said, when they really needed baskets, he was one of the guys that really stepped up to do it. And so, for me, certainly as president of the fan club, the choice was pretty obvious. But I don't know that you could really go wrong with either of the 3 guys. I mean, when you've got a game that 3 guys scored 91% of the points, I'm not sure that you can really go wrong with any of the 3. But he was the pick for me. I thought he played pretty solid defensively as well. Did have some lapses where he didn't play well there, but again, continues to have a lot on his plate on both ends of the court, and was glad to see him play well, rise to the occasion tonight.
Yeah, this segment would have been much harder if this was a 2-man show.
Yeah.
Hey, by the way, our buddy Chris, who runs the IU Artifacts Twitter account, just popped into the YouTube chat and said, Jerod, has there been any reference to Ryan's bold Juwan Morgan prediction in preseason and your stunned reaction? And for those who missed that, I think that was on Assembly Call Radio when Ryan, basically said, Juwan Morgan might not be here next year. And we were like, where's he going to go? And he said he might go pro. And that kind of stunned a lot of us. And I could have read this, by the way, while Ryan was on here, but he's already had enough I told you so moments today, so I didn't want to give him the satisfaction. But look, I mean, you got to give Ryan a very teeny tiny bit of credit and give Juwan Morgan a massive amount of credit for the way that his game has developed. And he gets my game ball. And again, I feel like sometimes when a guy establishes himself as the clear leader, like Yogi did for several years there, you run the risk of starting to take that guy's production for granted. And Juwan has become that guy now. I mean, on a team of inconsistent players, and granted, he's had some inconsistent games. I mean, I didn't think he was particularly great against Wisconsin. And for stretches of that game, I didn't think he was good, but he still produced. And this is a team that really just struggles to produce sometimes. And so you need those consistent producers. And, he certainly put up the numbers today, the 20 points, the 12 rebounds. He had 4 block shots. And look, let's not underestimate the block shot that he had at the end of the first half. Because I think at that point, did he have 2? He might have had 2 fouls at that point, or maybe he only had 1. But either way, he couldn't risk getting a foul. But I think it was Nate Mason or somebody drove to the lane. And, Juwan had a great block shot that allowed Indiana to maintain the lead. And just those plays, the big buckets that he made, the big rebounds that he got, which, I really feel like for a team that came into this game because of the keys from their coach, really focusing on rebounding, I really thought as much as the, 3-pointer set tones and some of the breakaways and the dunks for Justin Smith might have set the tone, I thought Juwan Morgan's toughness on the glass set as big a tone as any for Indiana. And so he gets my game ball. And I frankly, I mentioned this before. I thought he was the best player on the court today. It was just such a consistent force for Indiana and continues to show that he's a great player and perhaps an all Big Ten level player. And if he can keep shooting in the future like he did today, the sky's the limit for the kind of impact that he can have on the Big Ten this year. For this Indiana team that's going to have to scratch and claw its ways to victory, and they're going to have to follow Juwan Morgan's lead to do it. So he was terrific tonight. All right, Andy, let's take a quick look ahead at Indiana's next opponent. I believe that game is Tuesday, an early start against Penn State. Am I correct? 6:30 Eastern.
It is Tuesday. I do not have the time in front of me, but that sounds accurate. So yeah, Penn State. I mean, they're 12-5, 2-2 in the league. Like I think most of the teams are at this point, 2-2 in the league. But they They beat Northwestern pretty handily last night, but they really don't have really any top wins to speak of. They've lost to most of the good teams they play. They also lost to Rider at home. And, this feels like, I don't know how many times it seems like it's happened that, everybody kind of thinks this is the year that Penn State's going to turn the corner. And they do have a lot of good players and Tony Carr, Lamar Stevens being back as sophomores. Mike Watkins, the big guy, redshirt sophomore, has been good as well. So they have, if you look at them statistically this season, they currently are in the top 20 in adjusted defensive efficiency for the season. But it's interesting if you look at where they are in league play, they're 6th in the league in conference only games. So some of that I think is built up by a schedule that they played that's not all that good. And while Ken Pom does adjust for some of the kind of the quality components, that'll be interesting. So again, if they're really that good defensively, that will certainly be a challenge for an IU team that has struggled to score. But and a lot of time they just haven't played well away from home, and they haven't played well against some of the better teams they played. Whether you put IU in the category of better teams they've played is probably up for debate at this point. But I think it'll certainly be a tough test. Hopefully IU can get some rest to the guys that had to log all those minutes today, but should be a relatively evenly matched game. I would say their defense is better than their offense at this point, and should be a pretty good game.
And I'll tell you what, it's nice the order that these two games happened in. I'm really glad that the Wisconsin game and kind of that poor performance came first. And now you've got a little momentum from the Minnesota game that hopefully will carry into a nice crowd for that Penn State game. And I think, a crowd after that Wisconsin game, might have been kind of pensive, might have been a little bit frustrated, certainly would have responded to the team playing well. But now I think, they'll be ready to go from the start. And look, in this team, they respond to that. So this isn't necessarily a game like the Duke game where it's nationally televised and a big game from that perspective, but it's the kind of game that if you're going to certainly we're not talking about challenging for competing in the Big Ten, but if you're going to challenge for a 500 record in the Big Ten, let's say, this is the kind of game that you need to win. And so I think Indiana's got to come out, play with the same kind of effort and focus and just do whatever it takes mentality that they had today. And if they do that, they can get a win. That's a win they absolutely need to have.
Well, and I mean, if you look 3 of the next 4 at home, you've gotten 2 road games already out of the way, out of the gate. And each of these 3 home games is winnable. You've got Penn State, probably be the toughest game of the 3. You've got Northwestern, who is really reeling at this point, not playing well at all. Then you go to take that trip up to East Lansing where, there are 0 expectations for that game. But you
4% chance to win, according to Ken Pom.
You're telling me there's a chance.
I'd like to see how those
1 in a million talk. I don't know. So and then they then they come back home to play Maryland, who's dealing with injuries and really struggling as well. So if ever there was a time for this team to really develop a little bit of consistency, sustain some of the positive growth that they had today, it feels like this stretch presents an opportunity to do that. Whether they'll take it or not goes back to the things that we talked about before of we all are in the I'm keeping this team at arm's length. I'm not going to get too excited about it. But if ever there was a time that they could really do that and kind of build some momentum, this is a great stretch for it. And I think, that first game of those 4 will tell us a lot about whether they're going to be able to take advantage of that opportunity or not.
This kind of time frame, this January sequence here always seems to kind of be a time when we build a little bit of momentum. Like last year, even we did that. This is when that victory over Michigan State happened, and I think we got over 500 and started to think, hey, maybe we can make something of this season before it all came crashing down again. So, hopefully, like you said, hopefully the team can take advantage because they need to win some of these games because this is a nice stretch of winnable games. All right, you are listening to the Assembly Call IU postgame show. Remember, because you are an Assembly Call listener, you get 15% off your entire order at HoosierProud.com. So if you want officially licensed IU gear, one of our Assembly Call logo t-shirts, or one of Hoosier Proud's unique Indiana-inspired designs, visit HoosierProud.com and use the promo code ASSEMBLY at checkout. That's HoosierProud.com, promo code ASSEMBLY for 15% off your entire order. I'm Jerod Morris. I'm here with Andy Bottoms. Ryan Phillips was with us. Had to bow out a little bit early tonight, but it is time for last call. Andy, your closing statement on tonight's much-needed Indiana victory.
Yeah, it was, I think, much needed on a number of fronts. It was just nice to sit back and be proud of the way this team played and fought and get excited about the things that they were doing for the first time, feels like, in a few weeks. And so, I guess when I go back to why we do this show, why we started the show and all that, it was because we were all fans and enjoyed seeing the team play well, and love to see them sometimes against the odds, rise up and play really well. And I thought this was, for me, after the last few days of, trying to parse through and process and all those kinds of things with what had happened against Wisconsin, while this team has certainly proven to be Jekyll and Hyde, it was a fun game. It was fun to watch this team succeed, and hopefully it's something that they can really build some confidence from, because they should be proud of the way that they played. Particularly those guys who really shouldered the load and stepped up, who may not have shown leadership from a vocal standpoint, but they sure put the team on their back when they really needed it. And every time things started to get away from them in a way that games have gotten away from this team over the course of the season, one of those guys stepped up and made a play, and that was awesome to see. And those are some of the things that we all kind of expected coming into the season out of a veteran team. Like, you've got guys who are going to want to do that. So we're now officially past the halfway mark of the season, and hopefully that's a sign of things to come. As we all said, we're a little bit leery to believe that and go all in on it, but it was a really fun game, fun to watch, and something these guys should really be proud of, both the players and the coaches, to come back from a really disappointing performance. And for every bit as disappointing as the other one was, this one was just as exciting.
Absolutely. I want to use my final statement just to throw some more kudos Robert Johnson's way, and really to try and counter some of the negativity that I see about him. And Andy, you noticed this, the couple of games that you man the Assembly Call Twitter account, the negativity towards Robert, I don't think it's warranted. And that's not to say that there aren't things to critique, because there certainly are. And, it hasn't just been that he shot poorly this year. I think if it was just about, Robert, shooting and he's shooting 31.7% from 3-point range, we could all live with a guy not necessarily shooting well. But it's the turnovers, and it's, some of the boneheaded decisions and some of the tentativeness, that we see, that frustrates everybody. And I get that. And there's something to be said for, this guy is a senior. He's played a lot of minutes. He should be held to a higher standard. And I get that too, but that doesn't mean that you can just dismiss all the positive contributions that a guy makes because your head is caught in a fog of the negative plays. And for any player, what they do on the court, you have to add up their positive contributions, subtract their negative contributions. And if it's positive, then that guy is contributing. And obviously the better the player, the bigger the difference between those two. And some of Robert's bad plays really stick out because it's poor ball handling, or it's the kind of decision that, we look at, obviously as guys that all played basketball at varying levels and say, well, shoot, that seemed like an easy decision. You made a shot fake. You're wide open for a little floater. Just take it, and so it becomes one of those decisions that's easier to chastise and that kind of lingers in the mind. But I would really, for those of you, if you found yourself unable to get excited about this performance from Robert Johnson, even before his flurry at the end where he was scoring points, I would really challenge you to try to see the good in what Robert is doing out there. You don't have to ignore the bad, but try to see the good and focus on some of the positive plays, because we have seen Archie be extremely willing to sit guys and not play guys. And if you're not playing well or playing hard or doing the kinds of things that he wants you to do, he'll sit you. There's a reason that Robert's leading the team in minutes and playing 83% of the minutes. I don't think it's an effort thing with him. I don't think it's a want to thing. I think he struggled with confidence, struggles with his assertiveness sometimes and learning his new role. But I thought today was really different for him. And I hope it's a turning point. We'll have to see. But I thought he really rebounded from some poor plays and came back at the end of that game and was just tremendous. And even throughout the game, as he was piling up, some turnovers and some bad plays, was countering them with good defense or by making a shot or by making a good cut here. And so just, you see this sometimes with seniors, where guys expect the world from them. And when, that guy only gives us 70% or, shoots 65% of what we think they're capable of, what our expectations are, we get overly negative. And so let's be careful with the narrative about Robert Johnson. Again, there are things to critique, and it's never wrong to critique a play that a guy makes. But I just think you run the risk of not enjoying this guy's senior season and the positive contributions that he's making if you just focus on the negative. So try to focus on the positive. That's my final thought today. And, obviously it's easier to make that statement on a night when Robert goes 28-7-7, has 2 steals and makes some of the biggest plays down the stretch for Indiana's first road win. But a huge win for the team. Really proud of them. Even though it's a shorthanded Minnesota team, it was a shorthanded Indiana team, playing without a big man in Deron Davis, playing without a leader in Collin Hartman. And I just thought they showed a lot of grit, a lot of toughness, and it's kind of cheesy to say they wanted it more. But I walk away from this game thinking that Indiana wanted this win a little bit more than Minnesota did, and that's why we got it, because we got some of those loose balls, got some of those tough rebounds, and that's the kind of team that I'm proud to cheer for. Really proud of the Hoosiers tonight. All right, that'll do it for us on this edition of the Assembly Call IU postgame show. Remember, our live broadcasts immediately following every IU game are always available on our homepage at assemblycall.com and on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/assemblycall. And you can always catch up on demand anytime with our podcast. Just search for Assembly Call wherever you listen to podcasts. And perhaps most importantly, don't forget to go to assemblycall.com/join and join our free email newsletter. We send out a weekly news roundup, even in the off season, 6 Banner Sunday, to keep you up to date on everything going on with the Hoosiers. And the morning after every game, we send out a post-game analysis email that often provides insight that we didn't say on the show that we are able to remember, kind of glean with a little bit of hindsight and some perspective a couple hours after the game. So if you want the full Assembly Call experience, go to assemblycall.com/join. Get on that list. All right. Thank you for listening. We will talk to you again Tuesday night after IU Penn State. And then, of course, again after that on Thursday for Assembly Call Radio. Until then, keep your elbows in and your eyes on the rim, and go Hoosiers.